I want to start today with a number from the background documents that, honestly, it made me put my coffee down. I had to read it twice. 1 million.
It is a number that is genuinely hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. The assessment we're looking at today says 1 million species are currently facing extinction. And we aren't talking about, a slow fade over the next 1,000 years.
No, I don't know.
For many of these species, the documents say the threat is. It's just decades away.
Yeah,
We were standing on a precipice here.
that's right. And to put that into some kind of context, the text notes that the current global rate of extinction is tens to hundreds of times higher than the average over the past 10 million years.
Wow.
We are in completely uncharted territory.
And that is the terrifying backdrop. But the reason we're doing this deep dive isn't just to, stare into the abyss. It's because we have a blueprint in front of us that claims it can fix this. Today, we are unpacking the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework.
Which, yeah, most people in the field just call it the framework or the GBF. It was adopted back in December 2022, and it's effectively the world's peace treaty with nature.
A peace treaty, that's a strong term.
Hmm.
Is this just another status report, or is it actual policy?
Oh, it's definitely more than a report. This is Decision 154 from the Convention on Biological Diversity. It acts as a strategic roadmap with a very specific, very high-stakes mission:
Which is?
to take urgent action to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030.
Halt and reverse by 2030. That's an incredibly tight deadline. I mean, we're talking about turning around a planetary trend in just a few years.
It is aggressive. The document actually calls it a theory of change. The idea is that we need to transform our economic, social, and financial models right now, urgently, so that by 2050 we can hit that long-term vision of, quote, living in harmony with nature.
Okay, before we get to the how, I really want to understand the why. The framework lists out the direct drivers of biodiversity loss. And I think the ranking here is going to surprise a lot of people.
It usually does. When you ask people what the biggest threat to wildlife is, they almost always say climate change or maybe pollution.
Right. I would have bet money on climate change being number one, but that's not what this list says.
No. The number one driver, the one with the largest global impact, is changes in land and sea use.
So physically changing the planet, like cutting down a forest to plant soy or draining a wetland to build a parking lot.
Exactly that. It's the physical destruction of habitat. If an animal has nowhere to live, it doesn't really matter what the temperature is. Number two is the direct exploitation of organisms. So think overfishing, poaching. And then number three is climate change.
That's a huge takeaway for me. We hear so much about climate change, and obviously it's critical. But this document suggests that even if we solve climate change tomorrow, we'd still lose biodiversity if we keep bulldozing forests.
Precisely. Climate change makes everything worse, but habitat loss is the primary wound. After climate, you get number 4, pollution, and number 5, invasive alien species.
The framework also separates these direct drivers from indirect drivers. What's the difference there?
Well, the direct driver is the bulldozer. The indirect driver is the economic system, the social values, the behaviors that paid for the bulldozer to be there in the first place.
Okay.
And the framework is pretty blunt that we can't fix the direct problems without addressing those underlying societal values.
Speaking of values, I noticed the language in this text is, it's broader than I expected from a UN document. It doesn't just stick to sterile scientific terms.
You saw the Mother Earth reference.
I did. It talks about systems of life and Mother Earth.
And that's significant. It's an explicit acknowledgement that biodiversity is a scientific construct, but for billions of people, the relationship with the planet is spiritual or it's cultural. The framework says that to succeed, we have to recognize these different worldviews. It's trying to bring everyone to the table, not just scientists.
Okay, so we've got the drivers, we've got the inclusive language. Let's look at the destination. The framework has a vision for 2050 and a mission for 2030. Let's start with the long game. What does the world look like in 2050 if this all works?
The 2050 vision has 4 main goals. Goal A is about the physical stuff, ecosystems and species. The ambition is to substantially increase the area of natural ecosystems.
And they put a hard number on the survival rate, didn't they?
They did. The goal is to reduce the extinction rate and risk of all species tenfold by 2050.
Tenfold. That would basically bring us back to what a normal background rate of extinction.
Ideally, yes. Then goal B shifts to how we use nature. It focuses on what it calls nature's contributions to people.
That's what scientists call ecosystem services, right?
Correct. It's all the things nature does for us for free.
Oh,
Bees
God.
pollinating crops, wetlands filtering water, forests storing carbon. The goal is that these services have to be valued, maintained, and enhanced. We can't just take them for granted anymore.
Now, goal C is where I got a bit lost. It talks about digital sequence information, or DSI. Can you break that down for us? It sounds a little sci-fi.
It does, right. It's really the frontier of biology. Historically, if you wanted to develop a new medicine from a plant, you needed the physical plant.
Right, you had to have it in your hand.
Exactly. Today, scientists can just sequence the genetics of that plant, upload the code to a database, and someone on the other side of the world can download that digital sequence information to do research.
So you don't even need the physical leaf anymore, you just need the data.
Exactly. And that creates a huge problem for fairness. If a company in a wealthy country uses the genetic code of a rare Amazonian plant to make a billion-dollar drug, does the country where that plant came from get anything?
And goal C says they should.
Yes. It establishes that benefits from the use of genetic resources, including this digital info, must be shared fairly. It's basically trying to prevent biopiracy in the digital age.
Which leads us straight to goal D, which is, of course, about money.
The implementation goal, and the document is brutally honest here. It identifies a biodiversity finance gap. Basically, we are short about $700 billion per year.
$700 billion. That's the gap between what we're spending to save nature and what we need to be spending.
Right. It sounds like a massive number, but when you compare it to, say, global GDP or military spending, it's actually achievable. It just requires a massive shift in priorities.
So that's the 2050 dream. But to get there, we have to get through the next few years. And that brings us to the mission for 2030. This is the real meat of the document, the 23 action targets, humanity's to-do list.
And it covers everything from conservation to consumption.
Let's start with the most famous one. Target 3, or 30 by 30.
This is the headline grabber. Target 3 says that by 2030, at least 30% of the world's land, inland water, and marine areas must be effectively conserved and managed.
30% of the planet. Now, I've heard critics say, great, we'll just protect a giant chunk of ice in Antarctica and call it a day. Does the framework prevent that?
It tries to. The text is very specific. It says these areas have to be ecologically representative and well-connected. So you can't just protect the empty bits. You have to protect the areas that actually matter for biodiversity.
And it also mentions the people who live there, too.
Crucially, it explicitly recognizes indigenous and traditional territories. The old model of conservation, fencing off a park and kicking everyone out, is not the path forward here. It's about equitable governance, recognizing that indigenous people are often the best protectors of biodiversity.
So that's about protecting what's left. What about what we've already damaged? Target 2 is about restoration.
This is the fix-it target. It requires that at least 30% of degraded ecosystems are under effective restoration by 2030. So we hold the line on the healthy 30%, and we start healing the broken 30%.
Let's talk about those threats we mentioned earlier. Target 6 takes on invasive species.
This is a huge issue, especially for islands where, an introduced predator like a rat can wipe out entire species in a few years. The target is to reduce the rates of introduction by at least 50%.
Then Target 7, pollution. This one felt really aggressive to me. It calls for reducing excess nutrients lost to the environment by half. What does that actually mean?
It's mostly about fertilizer runoff. We put nitrogen and phosphorus on crops, but it washes into rivers, causes huge algae blooms, kills fish, and creates ocean dead zones. The target is to cut that runoff by half.
And it specifically calls out pesticides, too.
Yes, reducing the overall risk from pesticides and hazardous chemicals by at least half. It's not just about volume, but about using safer chemicals or better methods. The goal is just to make farming much less toxic.
And it also says we need to work towards eliminating plastic pollution.
It does. So if you look at this first group of targets, we're protecting land, restoring land, blocking invaders, and cleaning up chemicals. It's a physical cleanup operation for the planet.
But nature isn't just out there somewhere. We have to eat, and most of us live in cities. The framework shifts gears here to address human needs, right? Target 10 looks at agriculture and forestry.
This is where the rubber really meets the road. You can't save nature if you don't fix farming. So Target 10 calls for managing these areas sustainably, using things like sustainable intensification and agroecological approaches.
Sustainable intensification kind of sounds like a contradiction.
I know, it does, but it's a balancing act. It means growing more food on the same amount of land so we don't have to cut down more forests, but doing it in a way that preserves soil and water. It's about efficiency, but not at the cost of the ecosystem itself.
And for those of us in the concrete jungle, Target 12 was a really pleasant surprise.
Ah, the urban target. It's all about increasing the area and quality of green and blue spaces in cities.
I like that it explicitly connects this to human health. It's not just for looks, it's about our own mental and physical well-being.
And that link is a theme throughout. The framework talks about the One Health approach. It's this realization that, you can't have healthy people if you have sick animals and sick ecosystems. It's all one connected system.
Okay, now this is where we get to the really tough part. We can't do any of this with just government regulations. We need the private sector. Target 15 feels like a massive wake-up call for the corporate world.
Target 15 is potentially revolutionary. It requires governments to make sure large companies disclose their risks, their dependencies, and their impacts on biodiversity.
That word dependencies really stood out to me.
Yeah.
Usually companies report their impact, like we polluted this much. But dependency is different.
It's a total flip of the script. It forces a company to admit our entire business model relies on clean water, or we need wild bees to pollinate our crops. It frames nature not as a charity case, but as a critical supply chain risk. If nature crashes, the business crashes.
So it moves the conversation out of the PR department and into the CFO's office.
Exactly. It makes biodiversity a material risk. And it applies to their supply chains, their portfolios. Banks will have to look at who they're lending to. If a bank is funding deforestation, they're funding their own long-term risk.
Then there's Target 16, which looks at us, the consumers. It calls for having global food waste.
Which is just huge. If food waste were a country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter. Having it relieves so much pressure on the land, we wouldn't need to farm as much if we just ate what we grew.
But my favorite target, or maybe the most shocking one, was Target 18. This is about subsidies.
The follow the money target.
It says we need to identify incentives that are harmful to biodiversity and then eliminate or reform them. And the number they put on this is just staggering.
The target is to reduce those harmful incentives by at least $500 billion per year by 2030.
Let's just pause on that. $500 billion. That is $500 billion of public money, taxpayer money, that governments are currently spending to subsidize things that actively destroy nature.
Think of subsidies for fossil fuels or for fertilizers that cause that runoff we just talked about, or fisheries subsidies that encourage overfishing.
So we're literally paying to shoot ourselves in the foot.
Effectively. And the framework says, stop it. Take that money and redirect it to things that help nature. It's about realigning financial incentives so that doing the right thing is also the cheaper thing.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Paying for it all. Target 19 is about resource mobilization.
This is the commitment to get at least $200 billion per year in new funding by 2030 from all sources, public, private, domestic, international.
And there's a specific direction for that money to flow, isn't there?
Yes. It mandates increasing financial flows from developed to developing countries to at least $30 billion per year.
Why that specific flow? Is it just charity?
Not at all. It's pragmatic. Most of the world's remaining biodiversity hotspots, the Amazon, the Congo Basin, the Coral Triangle, are in the global south. It is just unfair and, frankly, unworkable to ask those nations to protect those global assets without providing financial support.
Throughout this whole document, I kept seeing references to indigenous peoples. It didn't feel like a footnote. It felt central to the whole strategy.
It is absolutely central. The text repeatedly emphasizes free, prior, and informed consent, or FPIC.
Meaning you can't just build a project on their land without them actually agreeing to it first.
Correct. Target 22 ensures their full participation in decision-making. Target 23 is entirely about gender equality and women's rights to land. The framework recognizes a hard truth. Indigenous peoples have been the most effective stewards of nature. If you exclude them, your plan will fail.
Okay, so to recap, we have a terrifying backdrop of extinction. We have a vision for 2050 to live in harmony with nature. And we have a mission for 2030 with 23 hard targets. Protect 30% of the earth, cut pesticide risk in half, stop bad subsidies, mobilize the cash.
That is a blueprint.
But, and I have to play devil's advocate here, we've had targets before. The Aichi targets were set in 2010, and we missed almost all of them. Why is this piece of paper any different?
That is the question, isn't it? But there is a difference here. The framework includes a section on responsibility and transparency. It sets up a cyclical system. Yes. Governments have to revise their national plans to align with these global targets. Then they have to report on them using the same indicators. That's key. Everyone using the same yardstick. Then there's a global review. If we're off track, the idea is to ratchet up the effort.
So there's a feedback loop. You can't just sign it and walk away.
Transparency creates pressure. It makes it much harder for countries to hide their inaction. It turns these targets from simple aspirations into something you can actually be audited on.
So for the person listening to this, why should they care? Why does a document signed in Montreal matter to their daily life?
Because, as the framework makes so clear, nature isn't a luxury item. This connects biodiversity directly to the things we all rely on: food security, clean water, protection from floods, from pandemics. If this framework fails, it's not just that we lose some rare frogs, it means our agricultural systems become fragile, our water gets dirtier, our resilience to climate change just collapses.
It's the infrastructure of life itself.
It's the operating system for our economy and our existence. And you can't run a society on a crashed operating system.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave the listener with one thing that really stuck with me, and it was a footnote, of all things.
Footnote 13.
Yes, attached to Target 19. It defines Mother Earth-centric actions. It describes an ecocentric and rights-based approach, enabling harmonic and complementary relationships between peoples and nature.
It's a profound thing to find in a policy document. It explicitly suggests ensuring the non-commodification of environmental functions of Mother Earth.
It's a heavy thought. I mean, we've spent this whole time talking about ecosystem services and valuing nature and dollars to get businesses on board. But then this footnote suggests the ultimate goal is to move beyond that entirely.
And that's the tension, isn't it? The targets use the language of economics, of money, risk, services to get us to stop the destruction right now. But that footnote implies that to truly succeed, in the long run, we need a philosophical shift. We need to stop seeing nature as just a warehouse of resources we manage and start seeing it as a living entity we're a part of.
The targets are the mechanics, but that shift, that's the real work.
If we can make that shift in mindset, the targets suddenly become much, much easier to hit.
Well, that is plenty to chew on. Thank you for helping us navigate this massive blueprint.
It's my pleasure. It's the most important plan we have.
And thank you for listening to this deep dive. Now go outside and appreciate some of that biodiversity. We'll see you next time.